Live from SABC studios in Auckland Park, Johannesburg. Welcome to this week's first edition of The Watchdog. My name is William Vogo, and on the show tonight, President Cyril Ramaphosa holds emergency meetings with, among others, Eskom management and leaders of political parties represented in the National Assembly. Fed-up communities, meanwhile, are taking to the streets, with political parties also making pronouncements that they too intend mobilizing citizens to embark on more public protests. Prominent lawyers are also pondering legal action against Eskom and the Minister of Public Enterprises. We also speak to a DA leader fighting for his political life. All that's coming up in tonight's episode of The Watchdog, which starts now. President Cyril Ramaphosa's office says he has had to cancel a trip to the World Economic Forum in Davos to focus on the worsening electricity crisis. But if social media comments are anything to go by, South Africans aren't really impressed. Annette Bauer saying, Mr. Ramaphosa, tell us why there is kilometers of trucks full of coal on way to Mozambique and Richards Bay. Is this fixing the Eskom crisis? Ramasela Mashishi says, what is he practically going to do that he has not been able to do the past year? If we don't physically see the reason for him missing that trip, then he might as well continue with his year plan. Tuso Itumeleng says, the load shedding that we're experiencing is not just a temporary problem. It is a structural issue with no real solution in sight. What's more worrying is that government's off efforts to tackle South Africa's energy crisis, as described by the COO, lacks urgency and coherence. Khadebe Wazalwa Ntombi Kamhlanga says this changes nothing except that we know that he will be around. He, Cyril Ramaphosa, just told the whole world that load shedding is a thing of the past in South Africa. So what energy crisis is he talking about? Only some of the tweets that people sent to the SABC today, as people were, of course, reacting to the news from President Cyril Ramaphosa's office that he had to cancel his trip to the World Economic Forum to focus on the worsening energy crisis. This morning, the president convened a meeting of leaders of all political parties represented in the National Assembly. The country's third largest political party, the Economic Freedom Fighters, thinks it was really much ado about nothing. In a statement issued in the afternoon, the EFF objected to what it referred to as an, quote, objectionable and utterly false statement that the government is not solely responsible for the provision of electricity and that we must all take responsibility, close quote. The statement goes on to say it is solely the ANC government that chose to appoint an incompetent chief executive officer and senior management at Eskom, and that all the boards and senior management in Eskom are appointed by the ANC government and overseen by an ANC minister. At the meeting today, the EFF statement says, President Cyril Ramaphosa, Eskom board members and the CEO, as well as the National Energy Crisis Committee, made representations which basically considered that Eskom and the government are not in a position to resolve South Africa's electricity crisis, certainly not within the next 24 months. At the weekend, the leader of the country's leading opposition party, John Steenhuisen, announced that the Democratic Alliance would embark on a protest march to the governing party's headquarters, Luthuli House, to express their outrage at what they call the ANC-engineered electricity crisis. Residents of two towns in the Free State today embarked on protests over both water and power cuts. In Parys, protesters went on a rampage, setting alight a family house of Ngwate Executive Mayor Victoria De Beer. 4 people were arrested for public violence. Residents have also burned water tanks and blockaded a busy R59 stretch between Parys and Sasolburg. A huge police contingent had been deployed to monitor the situation. And in Kroonstad, scores of residents handed over their memorandum of grievances at the Mkhaga municipal offices. They demanded frequent water supply and an end to the power cuts. The municipality says it's written to Eskom to exempt certain strategic areas from power cuts, including reservoirs. In KwaZulu-Natal, residents of Phoenix, north of Durban, took to the streets in protest over service delivery. The angry community blockaded the main roads leading to and out of the area after going for 3 days without electricity.
The aftermath of service delivery protests. Overnight, angry residents took to the streets, burning tires and rubble to vent their frustration after days without electricity. 29-year-old Samantha Naidu has lived here for years. She is a single mother of a 13-year-old and also cares for her sick mother, who is on chronic medication. They've been without power for the past 3 days. Naidu says they are often left in the dark and forced to dispose of food from their fridge. She says life for them has become unbearable at times.
During Christmas, we had no electricity and water. From Christmas, Boxing Day, and I think the next day was also a public holiday, so we had nothing. And you must know, whether you're Christian, Tamil, Muslim, it doesn't matter. Everybody celebrates Christmas. So I went all out, ordered a lot of food for my family, and all for it to get off. Gammon, roast beef, 3,000 worth of food, everything went off in the bin. Same, we did that for New Year's again. I think we had a problem, and we had braais and stuff, and it didn't work out. So we lost a lot of money that we worked so hard for all year, just to save towards the end of the year, to give your loved ones a little bit of extra. Because let's face it, for the last 3 years, we've had COVID. I've nearly experienced almost death. My mother as well. And we just wanted a little bit of joy, and we didn't get that. And we're still not getting that.
But right now, we're getting no feedbacks from anybody. So how do we get this problem solved? The electricity problem is an ongoing thing. And the water problem is an ongoing thing. At times you get both switched off at the same time. Now we're going into electric surge whereby we're getting it going around to 8 hours a day.
And it's not just the power cuts. The area has had extended water cuts over the last few months. The eThekwini municipality says its teams are working to ensure electricity and water are restored timeously. But some problems, it says, are beyond control.
So each time there is load shedding, when the electricity comes back, you will have instances whereby our mini substations are going to trip. Because remember, the system is not designed to be switched on and off. But also when it comes to the issues of water, recently we have recommissioned Reservoir 3, which is a very big storage that is going to assist us to arrest the current problem when it comes to water issues in the area of Phoenix. So currently we are building capacity to all our reservoirs in Phoenix, so we're very optimistic that by the end of this week, latest early next week, the system will stabilize. And obviously, the issue of water challenges in this area are going to be history. So we're simply just apologizing to the public.
Residents also complained of a lack of communication from local officials and the municipality. Meanwhile, police are continuing to monitor the situation in Phoenix. No arrests were made during the protest. Londi Khatebe, SABC News, Phoenix.
As rolling blackouts continue to frustrate, the effects are widespread, with the economy taking a further hammering. And the education sector is not immune either. The gap between privileged and disadvantaged schools is starkly evident. Independent schools rely on backup generators, while public schools, in sharp contrast, have no plan B, as SABC News senior reporter Griselda Lewis reports.
Well, the Curtis Nkondo School of Specialization in Soweto is one of the educational facilities that is severely impacted by the country's current rolling blackouts, offering maths, science, ICT, engineering. Well, the school does not use textbooks. You have e-books as well as cue boards for the teachers. So every time you have the lights going off, that does impact the process of learning and teaching here. It's a tough balancing act. So-called schools of the future unable to provide 21st century education with the lights going on and off. When power is restored, it's a rush to get in as much work as possible. And even though schools like this have backup, it's unsustainable to keep the generator running. What then for thousands of schools that are far worse off?
A large majority of them do not have generators. Yes, some of them don't require electricity, but for administration purposes, all our schools have computers. How are we going to receive data that we need for SASMs, which we use to report on the daily activities of schools, which we use for decision making, which we use for tracking the operation of schools? We rely on power for that to happen. It's impractical, actually, to provide a generator for every school. We've got more than 25,000 schools. Just imagine that number of generators. And where would the money come from? Because we don't have budget for such things.
In stark contrast to independent schools, where learning and teaching continues without disruption.
Within our membership, I think we're close to about 100% of schools actually being able to have some form of generators. But maybe the greatest impediment had been for many schools is the cost of trying to get solar panels and battery support. So I think that when you look at solar panels and battery support, that number I think would drop to around 10%. Of schools are going to the solar route, but I think that now they're going to have to just simply budget for it, because there's no way that you can continue functioning in a school in which there's no electricity.
Widening the gap between the haves and the have-nots.
They're sitting in classrooms that already have a shortage of textbooks, of stationery, teaching capacity. Their classrooms are overcrowded. And so where there isn't power and energy, and they don't have access to meals, and teachers can't do any printing, it just really means that they get left behind. That is the language that members of equal education that are school going are using. We get left behind because our peers can continue with learning during these periods. So I do worry that the school community is most affected by long hours of load shedding are sitting in the quintile 1 to 3 and sometimes 4 schools, which already experience huge amounts of inequality. So it perpetuates the inequality, if anything. And I really do, I mean, from a very humble place, which is the Department of Education, to be talking to national collaborative ministerial committees around what ESCOM and the Energy Department can do to support education in schools during this period.
With no end in sight to the rolling blackouts, effective learning and teaching blighted. Griselda Lewis, SABC News in Johannesburg.
Now, whether or not one agrees with those that took to social media to express their views about the reports of the president cancelling his trip to the World Economic Forum, or whether or not one agrees with the positions being taken by the leaders of opposition parties, What is still within the powers and ability of the people who met today, i.e. the president, cabinet ministers, ESCOM, leaders of political parties? What can they still do? Lungile Mashele and Dick Fosland are energy analysts, among the best you will get in South Africa today. Good evening to both of you. Thanks very much for your time.
Good evening. Thank you very much, and good evening to all angry viewers.
Now, political statements aside from the politicians who have been speaking today, the anger of South Africans, understandably aside, realistically speaking, if I may start with you, Lungile, what can ESCOM and the government do right now to really stop this from getting worse and worse, which looks like is a certainty?
So, this is a multifaceted sort of approach, and ultimately, if you want to execute a proper reliability maintenance program, which is what ESCOM actually requires, you need about 24 months of planning as well as execution. So ideally, 24 months ago, ESCOM should have started on a plan to say we're going to take certain units off on their outages. We need to procure long lead items. We need to start making payments for those items. We need to secure all the skills that are required. And we need to have a proper plan of how we're going to execute, have an outage optimization plan ultimately. Then you start executing your outages on a reliability maintenance program. As you couple this with the boiler maintenance program as well, which was supposed to be ongoing as ESCOM. Now, naturally, these things need money. And for the last 10 years or so, ESCOM have not received a cost-reflective tariff. Last week, they were granted 18.65%, which should certainly go a long way. The Minister in the Treasury has also said that they will be taking over a significant portion of ESCOM's debt. All of that should, in the next 24 months, alleviate load shedding in this country if you have a proper leadership team at ESCOM and the government.
Are we talking here, Lungile, about avoiding the situation getting worse than what we've seen already, or are including the worst that is perhaps yet to come?
I'm including the worst that is yet to come. I don't think we have seen the worst of it yet. And over time, yes, it will get better, it will get easier, but I'm certainly saying 18 to 24 months. ESCOM has been doing some kind of a maintenance program where they've taken off anything between 5,000 to 8,000 megawatts during the November, December, even January period. However, what we're seeing is that this is not yielding the desired benefit. So it means that even the maintenance that they're doing is not adequate.
Dick, from your vantage point?
Well, it has been suggested that the president or the government should install some kind of state emergency in this situation. For example, to be able to override too expensive or maybe from the beginning corrupted contracts that ESCOM is paying for, because one side of the crisis, of course, a very important side of the crisis, is money or the finances of ESCOM, the ability to do maintenance and the ability to buy diesels, to put that in when a coal power station is tripping. And there we also have the problem of austerity. I don't really know what the latest decision is about this now, but I mean, in December, the Treasury refused to give more money to ESCOM for pay for diesel, which is kind of like an emergency measure, because the 17 billion budget for diesel of ESCOM has run out. So austerity is one problem, and the debt crisis is another problem.
all the technical matters, I mean, I leave it a lot to such experts to speak about it. But when it comes to energy consumption in the country, you can see that it is very uneven, and that one of the emergency measures that could be taken, that is to start to ration the use of electricity. And I mean, the thoughts really go to the so-called energy intensive users group, who are using 40% of the electricity in the country. And especially one company sticks out here. And it has been suggested from several corners. When I pointed to the South 32 aluminium smelter in Richards Bay of BHP Billiton, this company or this outfit alone, it represents one stage of load shedding. It's over 1.2 megawatt that this smelter is taken, and it's not contributing at all that importance to the national economy. But the load shedding stages is hitting thousands of other companies and small and medium-sized companies all over the country. So to close this smelter, that would be one measure. But of course, then it would really be to step on powerful toes. And even today, the latest price contract with BHP Billiton, if you go to the document and look at it, you will see that the price that BHP Billiton is paying to Eskom, it is still secret. And I don't know why, because it should be a public matter so it could be discussed. Maybe it's only secret because it's embarrassing to Eskom. But I mean, these are all the type of contracts that should be looked over and renegotiated, or in a draconic situation simply changed in order to sort out Eskom's financial woes. That's what I think, to start with.
Well, I mean, if my memory serves me well, I mean, we're not the only country to where similar issues have been raised around BHP Billiton. And I remember someone this one time saying, well, you could look at that, at this contribution, but you should also look at jobs and other things. And, you know, that should matter as well, especially in a country like ours. But I don't want this to be about BHP Billiton, and that's probably a conversation for another day. But I think you did make your point there, Dick. But how sustainable, though, Dick, is the burning of diesel? Because presumably the whole point of having a crisis meeting is for everyone to put their cards on the table. Presumably Treasury is part of these conversations, you know. But realistically speaking, do they have the money, or can they give Eskom the money they need? And just how sustainable is the whole thing of like burning more diesel?
Well, I think, it's not sustainable either from an environmental or climate crisis point of view, but we are speaking about the emergency situation here. So I think it's out of line just to sort of go into other stages of load shedding just because the Treasury wants to promote its austerity policy. But I mean, the main thing to discuss, I think, is the debt burden of Eskom. And in my view, it doesn't matter really if you are shifting Eskom's debt to the Treasury if the public is continuing to pay the creditors as usual. And as I've pointed out in other interviews, and as AIDC, which I represent here, have been saying for 5-6 years now, the main creditor of Eskom is the dinosaur from the negotiated settlement. It is the government employee pension fund who stands for 20% of Eskom's debt. So if you look at the latest financial statement now from 2022, you will see that well, you can look at page 1, 2, 3 if you are interested. You will see that out of the financial cost of over 35 billion rand that Eskom is paying, and which is unsustainable, over 8 billion rand goes to other public entities, to the public sector family. And the main member of that family here, that is the government employee pension fund, which doesn't need this money to pay pension and benefits to its members. The money just goes and circulates on the financial market or is invested in the Joburg Stock Exchange. And I mean, the same goes for the Treasury. 12.5% of the Treasury's domestic debt is also a debt to itself, so to speak, to the government employee pension fund.
But that money will have to be there.
They don't need this money, and it should be renegotiated. You can't have such a roundabout of money.
But that money will have to be there when those workers need it.
Well, the government employee pension fund is running with a surplus after paying pension and benefits of close to 50 billion rand per year, and has been doing this for 15 years now. So it's just amassing a fortune of over 2 trillion rand. And when you have such a large public sector fund, you are using it in a crisis like this, and you are using it as concessionary lending to other utilities in crisis. You are not going to the international market and borrow money from the World Bank or the IMF. It is not rational, in my view. You should sort of take the money where it is, and you should cooperate within the public sector family, especially as it will not hurt pensions or benefits to the state employees who are retired.
Let's go back, to the maintenance program issue that you raised right at the beginning of your input, Lungile. I want us to take a listen to something Gwede Mandashe, the Minister of Energy, said about 3 months ago.
Eskom is having 45,000 megawatts connected, but at best it gives us 26,000 megawatts. And therefore there is a gap of 22,000 megawatts that are not decommissioned, but not giving us energy. Therefore, with that capacity connected, I think there can be no collapse of energy generation. But we should actually pay attention and focus on servicing the units that are available in Eskom. If there is still confusion of an entity that is doubtful what it should do because it is under pressure to go green, then we're going to be in darkness. I have said that on my capacity as a Minister of Energy, that sometimes we like what is appearing nice. Germany is dismantling a wind farm to expand operations of a coal mine today, as we sit here today. I can tell you that coal miners in the United States are putting pressure on President Biden to invest more on coal production. Here we say we must leave coal. I am one of the people who says we can have a transition, but that coal is not about just numbers. It's about human beings.
Quite a number of issues to pick up on there, Lungile. But let's start with the 22,000 megawatts gap. Is that still the case?
So it basically varies whether you're talking in summer or in winter, which time of the year. Currently, Eskom has about just over 50,000 megawatts installed capacity. And I want to make this very clear, it's installed capacity is not available. Then on any given day, South Africa demands about 28,000 megawatts in summer and maybe about 32 to 34,000 megawatts in the winter. So there certainly is a huge gap. And this is why, if you closely monitor Eskom's performance, one of the most dismal things that have happened there, especially over the last 3 years, has been the performance of the coal fleet, which is now at just over 50% energy availability. That's the EAF. So on any given day, what we're seeing is that Eskom's fleet Like today, I think about 16,000 megawatts is off due to unplanned, maintenance, which is basically breakdown. Last week, when we went into stage 6, it was about 18,000 megawatts that went onto breakdowns. Over and above that, Eskom are executing a maintenance program, which is now your PCLF, which is your planned maintenance. That also consumes about 5,000 to 6,000 megawatts. So there is a massive, massive amount of Eskom's fleet which is off due to planned as well as unplanned maintenance. And Minister Mantashe is basically saying, do the maintenance you need to do, close the gap, and you will not have a generation problem. However, what needs to be highlighted is that some of this fleet does need to be decommissioned. It was supposed to be decommissioned as early as 2017 already. Some of it is not worth keeping active anymore. There's also the minimum environmental standards, which have been an issue of concern, especially for the CEO of Eskom, and that is about 16,000 megawatts that needs to be taken off immediately because it's not meeting its minimum environmental standards. And this is what Minister Mantashe is referring to about if you're going to be chasing environmental goals, you're going to find yourself in a lot of trouble. If we were to go that 16,000 decommissioned immediately because of minimum environmental standards, as the CEO of Eskom said last year, we can easily find ourselves in stage 15 or even whatever crazy stage of load shedding.
Dick, is there evidence, though, that part of the problem is because we are, as a country that is, not doing things we could actually do here and now because we're chasing your environmental targets?
No, I mean, there are the coal power stations, they have to be decommissioned by one. And of course, you should start with them, those coal power stations which is in very bad condition. But you will have power stations on the grid for the coming 15, 20 years, but they have to be taken away and replaced with renewable energy. But I mean, you also have when it comes to the performance, which is now going sort of the energy capacity factor, the time when the coal power stations is really functioning is now below 50% of the time. You also, as has been pointed out, and that is also a matter of resources, I reckon, and of not only of political will, but of resources. You have to stop the syndicates, and you have to put sort of a lot of the energy into stopping the shifting of high quality coal on the way from the coal mines to Eskom. I saw in one of your tweets there a sender complaining about seeing all the coal going to Richards Bay and to Mozambique. Well, if you rely on investigative journalism, I think even SABC, a lot of that coal or sort of some of this coal has been stolen from Eskom and replaced by low-grade coal or even by something that is not coal at all. And that is something that is leading to the tripping of coal power stations and worsening the load-shedding crisis. So there's also a criminality issue here and the need for clamping down on the syndicates who are operating within and outside Eskom. I mean, it's a huge problem. It's also here you have kind of like a social movement taking the grip of the public sector in one of the most important companies that we have, which is Eskom, and which should lead the march out from the fossil fuel economy.
Well, our solution to the theft and everything that goes with that has been to send 10 soldiers to each of the power plants getting them to stand at the gate and hoping that they will, stop the theft. But I mean, Lungile, the reason I was asking about the transition is because also, I mean, in that bite, Gwedemandashe cites as an example Germany, the decision that they had to take, which seems or appears to be contradictory, to what they are supposed to do. But they did that for a reason. I think that's the point he was really making. Hence, I'm asking whether there are things, because there's no point in raising the issue, of our transition, if it is not a factor in what we are experiencing. So I'm looking for that direct correlation, if I'm making any sense.
So, if you look at our energy sector, let's say over the last 10 years, there has been a move away from coal, from fossil fuel, and a focus on renewable energy. And this has been done in many countries around the world. However, as a result of the Russia-Ukraine conflict last year, as well as the rise in prices of fuel globally, many countries decided to focus on energy security. And they decided to park their transition ambitions and focus on energy security. It needs to be said that in most countries, especially in the global north, they would not tolerate load shedding even for one night. If Germany, if Italy, if Spain, whatever, had to experience what we're experiencing for one day, the Minister of Energy, the President, would hang their heads in shame, and in the morning they would resign. Now, we are in South Africa, and for 16 years now, we have had this ongoing crisis. And it is not going to change unless there is some kind of political will. Our government, the people in power, know that they will not be punished. They will not be punished in their homes. They've got generators, they've got solar TV, they are sorted. They will not be punished in the streets. They've got VIP security, they've got blue lights, they're okay. They will not be punished at the polls either, because they have been kept in power for all of these years. And up until they feel the pinch of the citizen, nothing is going to change ultimately. But in all of these countries, they parked their transition and they said, let's put our citizens first. Energy security comes first, and that is what we will focus on.
Dick, I'm asking this because talking about alternatives here tonight, because, I mean, you recall, I think it was in August 2021, that it was announced that the threshold was going to be raised. Intensive energy sector, your mining companies, your Sasols, and the likes were going to be able to generate up to 100 megawatts, but that hasn't happened, and about 18 months later or thereabouts, we are talking about things that have not been done. And it is in that context that even though the EFF, for example, in statement says it is wrong to say that, we are all responsible, the government is, an ANC minister, it's an ANC government, they appoint the executive of Eskom, they appoint board members at Eskom. But you ask yourself, what happened to the other social partners who said, this was paraded as one of the, big solutions, but so much time has lapsed, and this hasn't happened.
Yeah, I mean, one problem in the relation with independent power producers, or when it comes to for-profit power producers, that is the issue of price, of course. And I guess that is why the price that BHP Billiton is paying for a smelter is still secret. And the same goes for the IPPs. I mean, one thing that is said, I think, by EFF or by radical trade unions, they are pointing to that the first IPP 20-year contract, they contribute over 13% to the electricity tariff, but they are standing for 6% of the total kilowatt hour produced. So, I mean, it will be slow if you engage the private sector in trying to really combat the climate crisis. Because they will only save the planet, so to speak, if it is to the right price. And I mean, it's not an individual problem or a problem of personality and so on. It's a part of the system. It's a part of the capitalist system of competition and so on. And also, if it is that solar and wind power energy is getting cheaper and cheaper by the month, then it is rational for every individual company to wait a while with the investment in order to when the technology have been developing even more and it becoming even more cheaper to produce electricity with solar and wind. And while we are waiting, then the carbon dioxide emissions and the greenhouse gases is increasing. They are still increasing now after COP27, and year 2022 was the warmest year on Earth. So I mean, the only time when the emission have decreased over the world, it was in the demise of the Soviet Empire, it was the financial crisis in 2008, and then it was the lockdown during the pandemic. All other years, the greenhouse gas emissions is going up, and we see the result in South Africa, not the least, with the heat waves and the rain bombs in KwaZulu-Natal. So how to get out of this without sort of interfering with private rule over key sectors of the economy and regulate and prohibit, ration electricity and so on, I don't know. You need a massive state or public sector intervention, both to deal with the electricity crisis now and to deal with the major threat to the planet of climate change. You can't have the private sector leading the march out from the fossil fuel society. Okay. It is a part of the economic system as we know it, and it's the economic system that has to be changed. So you have a sort of a battery of different urgencies that has to be addressed. Okay. And we need, what the activists saying, we need system change, not climate change.
That's why we're going to leave it for tonight. Let me thank both of you for agreeing to participate on the program, Lungile Mashele and Dick Fosland. Thank you so much. Of course, I mean, there's also a letter that has been sent out to the media and other people on behalf of a number of political leaders and community organizations, including Bantu Olomisa of the UDM and Musi Maimane. They have written, these lawyers have written to the Minister of Public Enterprises as well as ESCOM, demanding answers. They are asking for a response by no later than the 20th of January. They are listing a whole range of reasons what load shedding has done to the country and its economy, and they are threatening to take legal action if they don't get satisfactory answers by the 20th of January. I'm sure our sister programs will get into the detail of all of this. After the break, another DA leaders fight against the party leadership's decisions. Former Western Cape Speaker Masizole Mnasela is determined to fight till the bitter end after the DA's federal executive terminated his membership of the party and removed him as the legislature's presiding officer. He joins me on the line from Cape Town. Good evening, sir. Thanks very much for your time.
Good evening, Tristan, and thank you for having me. And also greetings to your viewers this evening.
I remember when this started, when rumors started surfacing about you going to be no longer the Speaker of the Western Cape Legislature. There were all manner of theories about what lay behind it. From where you sit, what had happened? What led to the apparent clashes between you and senior members of your party?
Well, it started off from the day I started dealing with the matter of the Deputy Speaker at the time, where there was a matter relating to the vehicle, the X5 that she was using, which she, in terms of the document, in terms of the policy and the enabling environment, she was not allowed to utilize at least beyond 30 days. So when that matter continued unabated in terms of my responsibility as the Speaker and the Executive Authority of Parliament, I then acted ultimately to ensure that the car was returned to the state, and that Parliament was not billed for the car that it was not supposed to be paying, because the Deputy Speaker refused to return the car. There were different feelings by the leadership on this matter in terms of how it should be dealt with, but it was clear in terms of statute how it should be handled. So I've then noticed the change of behavior, of character in the leadership in totality, especially among some of those who led in the Western Cape Provincial Parliament. And of course, there was also the undertones that were, deducted from the leadership in the form of Helen Zille, for instance. I remember when all of a sudden there were these charges, these allegations that were leveled against me, which was a fury of baseless allegations that were thrown around, calling me all sorts of names. And obviously it suits a person that looks like me in South Africa that we live in, where certain crimes are easily painted with a brush to particular individuals, and you sort of somewhat fit the crime, even before any of these get tested in any particular process. So but did
you not, for example, opt to not use the legislature's go-to lawyers and went instead for people outside of the system?
You see, there are certain processes, Christian, that guides how we deal with any matter in Parliament. One of which is internal processes, which we followed, and that process was exhausted. And then that process determined the process and what it is that we needed to do. There was a determination by the internal investigation, which was administrative in nature. But then the Deputy Speaker refused. She said, no, she can't pay. She should not be paying. In fact, at that point, she said the Secretary, in fact, must pay, the Secretary to Parliament, Mr. Romeo Adams. I then said, look, if there is a disagreement about who should pay, then especially when the Secretary has now been fingered that he must pay, I then needed to go to the State Attorney, and that is why the Office of the State Attorney is there, in order to advise on how the process should be. And then that was to ask them to investigate this matter and advise me as the Executive Authority of Parliament in terms of the Financial Management of Parliament and Provincial Legislatures Act of 2009, and say, what should I then do? Who is the person that should pay back the money to Parliament? And that report, which I tabled in Parliament in May this year, said the Deputy Speaker must pay. She has violated certain prescripts in terms of the Code of Conduct, and of course, she needed then to pay in terms of the financial management of in terms of FAMPLA, which is the Financial Management of Parliament and Provincial Legislatures Act. So it was a very technical report which came back and gave it clearly in black and white on who should pay, you know. And also it further said that the secretary needed to also be held accountable, which I did as the speaker. And there were no questions about that. Now the questions was, why should then be a different process by the deputy speaker? So the party, instead of doing anything about the deputy speaker, they came for me.
Okay, but now, whatever you may think of this whole set of circumstances, however unfair you may feel that what your party did, was or is, fact of the matter is you're no longer the speaker. You're no longer even a member of the party. Why would you insist on? Why would you keep on, or what? Why are you fighting this when it is abundantly clear that you're not needed?
It's a painful reality, Kusane, and I think it's one that I've been trying to contend with. I've spent over the past 2 decades in the DA as a member, and of course, 20 years as the member of, as a public representative. 7 of those years I was a councillor, and 13 as a member of parliament. And of course, I've been a speaker for 3.5 years. It's the fact that the way I was removed as a member of the party and subsequently as speaker and a member of parliament, it was something that I view it as illegal. I view it as unfair, and I view it as unconstitutional in terms of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. But of course, in terms of the DA Constitution, we are a party of due process. We are a party that believes in the principle of audi alteram partem rule. We've always preached that. Even our name is the name that is after the beautiful name of democracy, which is a democratic alliance. And there's no way that one could simply wake up and the next thing you're no longer a member of the party. So we are challenging this in the court of law, because the first thing I did was to ask the party, but you know, Helen Zille wrote me the letter to say you are gone, you're no longer the member of the party. You ceased when you said this and that in the press. But the point for me is that I feel quite strongly that they are wrong. I feel that Helen is wrong. And I feel that those who assisted in taking this decision are wrong. What should be happening right now is that the party must withdraw their own cessation letter. They must withdraw their own expulsion letter to expel me in order for me to go back to being a member of the party and to go back and be a member of parliament and be the speaker of parliament. You will recall the issue of Johannesburg mayor who was removed, and there were questions about how that process was. Even though there was a couple of weeks or so that had come to pass, the mayor, Mpopalata, went back to her office. She became the mayor again. So the question
it is a different set of circumstances, though. But here's what I would like to know from you, just finally. What exactly is at stake? What is at stake for you in this? Why are you pursuing this? Is it just to be able to get the job back, or are there bigger issues at stake?
If it was just about the job only, I think one would have asked, can I do another job? But this is about justice. This is about our freedom that we fought for in this country to liberate all persons, irrespective of the color of their skin. But this is about the basic tenet of our freedom, of our constitution that talks about the audi alteram partem rule. And then the basis of that is the treatment that I've been subjected to by those in the leadership of my party, some of whom have said so many terrible things about me. And before I get the opportunity to answer in the disciplinary hearing, then they decide to remove me. I was at the time, we were sitting in the disciplinary hearing with the panel when I received the letter to that I'm gone.
Yeah.
And that is when the so-called public whistleblowers were refusing to come back and give testimony about their so-called allegations, these frivolous allegations.
Okay.
And this whistleblower was begged to come back because she left in the previous Friday. She just packed and said, I don't like this kind of questions that were asked by my lawyers.
Yeah.
And I mean, imagine you put a case, you say, Vuyo has done this. And now when you must come and to prove and say, what did Vuyo do? Then you run away. You refuse to answer.
Okay.
And when this person was begged by the DA lawyers, by the DA Federal Legal Commission, Glenis Breitenbach, to come back, we were waiting for that time to happen. And we're sitting there being told that she's coming back. And she, instead of coming back, I was the person who was told to go and never to set my foot again in the DA. I built this organization. I joined the DA voluntarily. I was never recruited in this organization. And I will not be pushed.
Okay.
I am a member of this organization. Even as I'm sitting here, I was illegally removed and I need to gain my membership back. I need to wear my blue t-shirt again. And I need to go back to Parliament to represent the people of this province and the people of my country.
Well, let's see how this one pans out this year. Thank you very much for your time, Malizole Nqasela, of course, determined to see it through all the way. That's our show for tonight. To join us again tomorrow evening, same time.